Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Malia Hampton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Major Ashley Crosby. We are honoured to acknowledge Vice Admiral Yumio Utsuka, Director General Defence Intelligence Headquarters, Japan, accompanied by Major General Matthew Hall, Director Defence Intelligence Organisation, Australia, and the accompanying delegation. We warmly welcome the delegation representing Open Arms and the members of the Open Arms National Advisory Committee who are attending this evening's ceremony. Open Arms provides counselling services and support for current and ex-serving ADF personnel and their families. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Ulladulla Public School. From Victoria, St Joseph's School, Numurkah, and Mansfield Rudolph Steiner School. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Harold Breedon. Harold Breedon was born in Sydney in 1887, the son of Thomas and Sarah Breedon. Known as Toby, he attended Marrickville Public School. After leaving school, he worked as a clerk. In early 1915, Breedon enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force. He trained at Liverpool Camp near Sydney for several weeks, and in May embarked on the transport ship Themistocles, bound for Egypt. He completed further training at the Australian Army camps in Egypt with his unit, the 18th Infantry Battalion. Breedon landed on Gallipoli in early August. 1 week after he arrived, he was wounded in action during the Anzac assault on the Turkish trenches at Lone Pine. Having been hit by shrapnel in his leg, he was evacuated, first to the hospital at Mundros Island and then to the hospital in Cairo. At the end of September, he had rejoined his unit on Gallipoli and remained there until the Australians withdrew the peninsula in December. In Egypt, the AIF took on new recruits and effectively doubled in size. Breedon remained in the 18th Battalion, and with the other veterans of the Gallipoli campaign, he had the task of familiarising the new soldiers with life on active service. The unit trained in Egypt until mid-March, when it sailed to France to join the fighting on the Western Front. The 18th Battalion's first major action was in France at Pozières, where it was engaged from late July to early August. The Australian 2nd Division, to which the battalion belonged, attacked the German trenches after early assaults had failed. On the first day of the assault, Breedon was wounded in action a second time, this time shot in his leg. He was transferred to a hospital in England to recuperate. In mid-November, Breedon had recovered and returned to France. The French winter of 1916 and 1917 was the most severe in recent memory, and the Australians in the trenches suffered from the bitter cold and snow. As the weather warmed up, it became clear that the German forces had made a strategic withdrawal to a stronger defended position. The 18th Battalion was involved in following the Germans and engaged in a major battle at Bullecourt in May. Following the wounding of a fellow soldier, Breedon was temporarily made Lance Corporal. In September, the focus of the Australians shifted north to the Belgian border. Breedon and the 18th Battalion were involved in the third battle for the city of Ypres. At the Battle of Menin Road, Breedon was wounded in action for a third time, once again suffering a bullet wound to his leg. He recovered in a hospital at France and was able to rejoin the unit at the end of October. Breedon was granted leave in England in December 1917. Since leaving Gallipoli, Breedon had been punished on several occasions for being absent without leave, but after his third wound to the legs, he overstayed his leave in England by more than 3 weeks. When he returned to duty, he faced a court-martial and was found guilty. Sentenced to 90 days field punishment, this sentence was remitted due to the need for soldiers in the Australian units. In March 1918, the German army launched what would be its final major assault of the war, which became known as the German Spring Offensive. A key objective for the German forces in this attack was to capture the rail hub city of Amiens and split the British forces in the north from their French allies in the south. British and Australian forces managed to halt the offensive in April at the town of Villers-Bretonneux, less than 30 kilometres from Amiens. Breedon and the 18th Battalion were stationed at the town to help stop the German advance. In the first week of April, the 18th Battalion was in the front line at Villers-Bretonneux, during which time the men were targeted by German artillery and machine gun fire. At the end of the week, the unit was relieved and the men moved to billets in the smaller village of Gentel, behind the front lines. The battalion's war diary noted that the village's civilian population had evacuated in the face of the fighting, so there was plenty of straw for the men to sleep on, and the men had their first decent sleep for over a week. At 6 a.m. the next morning, the 9th of April 1918, the men were awoken by German artillery barrage falling on the village. The unit rapidly moved to a nearby field and dug in, but Breedon was struck by shell fire and wounded. He died of his injuries later that day. He was 31 years old. Harold Breedon remains lie in St. Pierre Cemetery in Amiens. His grieving mother had the following epitaph inscribed in his headstone: "His the gift of sacrifice, his life given to keep the empire ours. His parents suffered further pain when the package containing his personal effects was lost. It was bound for Australia on the steamship Barunga when the ship was torpedoed by German submarines off the coast of Cornwall in July 1918. British destroyers were soon on the scene and managed to rescue all aboard, but Breedon's personal effects, along with those of about 5,000 other Australian soldiers who had died in the Western Front, were lost. Private Harold Breedon is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Harold Breedon, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.